You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing, a podcast for progressive club leaders ready to increase their club's revenue. The time for change begins right now.
Adapting to a changing industry is difficult no matter the business. The private club industry is going through that today, and it requires clear vision and strong leadership. The Country Club in Brookline, Massachusetts is one of the most historic clubs in the industry, yet they've been able to stay on top of the latest marketing and communication trends. In today's episode, we chat with Assistant General Manager Kristen LaCount, who shares how the Country Club has come to embrace and implement change.
Kristen, thanks so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me, Ed.
Well, we have had the opportunity to get to know each other through some of our experience, or my experience with the Country Club in Brookline, and you guys, we've talked in previous podcasts with Jackie Singleton about some of the changes that you made to your member communications, and if you're interested, you can go back. I think it's one of our first 3 episodes, actually, if you're interested in going back and listening. For you who are listening, but for those of you who are listening today and not familiar with some of the things and changes that were implemented from a super high level, Kristen, could you just maybe just so our listeners can get up to speed as to what was done? We're not going to go into great detail on this, but over the last couple of years, some of the changes that have been made as it relates to your member communications.
Sure. I think to highlight some of the evolution and keep it in a nutshell, the birth of the communications department for us was really driven by the website and online reservations from one group of curlers, and that was back in 2006.
Curlers, so like
from
the
there,
sport curling, right?
For curling, correct. It
Right.
was to sign up for events online. From there, I think as other sports started to catch on, whether it be rackets or golf or skeet shooting or, even our pool and lessons, things would take place, the demand really grew from 2007 to 2010. And in that transition, we implemented the position of having a communications director. And around 2010 to 2012, it grew into more of a department of 2. Online reservations really began to evolve into demands on newsletters and marketing plans for each department, and committees really started to grab hold of that. So we actually implemented a communications committee to really build support from a board of governors position and start to invest in some of the things that we would need, not just necessarily like items like a software type of computer, but really start to invest that this was shifting the culture a little bit, and having something like a communications committee, which I know we're going to talk about in a little while with how committee driven we are, was a bold statement from a governance standpoint, because we've implemented something that really, if you look back at the club 30 years ago, hard copy bulletin boards and were really the only way that we communicated to the membership, other than a hard copy bulletin that would make it to their mailbox once a month. And something like a flyer at the front desk advertising an upcoming social event was really taboo around here. And if you came onto property now and took a walk around, you'd start to see a lot more soft marketing is what we like to be a little more known for. But I think even looking at what we've transitioned to in a communications department now of 3 individuals, and in design training as necessary, we have Instagram, we're focused on an app, and calendar and reservation platforms have evolved and changed. And if I look back to 2006, 2007, that era, we really were in a mode of keeping a plug-and-play mode where we would outsource many different platforms and have it all feed through the website. But these days, website companies and some of the back-office software that we have available to us have really got together to keep us kind of a one-stop shop. And the consistency to the member and the member experience in that has been a really positive thing. And just launching the app and more online reservations as we speak. We're in the process of new launches with that now. And has been really exciting for the club.
Yeah, I was going to say, sorry to keep interrupting you, Kristen, but you see that through higher engagement in open rates and more people that are actually opening, checking out your communication, which is something that Jackie has been very forward in speaking about, is just that change, which has prompted you guys to do more stuff, which is really cool.
Sure, and I think, probably worth a mention, but if anyone is looking for ideas out there, one of the things that we do from the board perspective is every board meeting each month, Jackie provides stats for them. So everyone those committee chairs are in touch with what their click rates are compared to industry averages. They know what things were popular, what worked, what didn't. And we try to be forthcoming with that type of communication to the board members too, which, as we get more into board discussions and that type of thing, I think that transparency for the whole board to see who's doing really well with their marketing plans and how we can tie that back to reservations for certain things or tea times has been really exciting. And I think that evolution has been really something being accepted by a board to implement a committee and then really stay on top of it and keep on top of what trends are coming our way has been a game changer for us.
Yeah, that's cool. And I want to dive more into that, the power of just data and analytics and feedback that, as it relates to communicating with boards and things like that. A lot of what we're going to talk about today is around leadership, change management, things like that. And if you're listening and you haven't heard the first podcast with Jackie Singleton from earlier in the year, and you're not familiar with the Country Club, historic club in New England. I mean, I think that the people who are familiar with your club, Kristen, and have heard some of the things you're doing, and I've had the opportunity to speak to a lot of club marketers and GMs, and they kind of look at me like, wow, that's pretty amazing. You've created some change that has, you as a club, not necessarily you personally, although you've been actively involved, but it's required a lot of people and a lot of department heads and staff to get on board. Can you, from a leadership position, can you describe the Country Club's belief system around change and buying into change? I mean, this is a culture that has been created really from the top down, hasn't it?
Sure. And I think on a grand, when you look at the club, the club was founded in 1882. Its mission statement holds true today to what it was founded, which is social and recreational activities. And I think being an old traditional club, the club knows its identity. And there's a sense of pride in saying that our board does make decisions and keep discussions based on the mission and the culture of the club. And there's a protective nature in that approach for a lot of who we have come through board and committee positions. And I would say the same is true for the staff and department heads, which is probably where most of my experience is more in the operational end of things, but we tend to try to educate our senior group first. So, a director of golf, a director of grounds, a CFO, our director of facilities, myself, and David Shagg, the GM, and our director of rackets. And we kind of put our heads together. And when we're about to really do anything here that will be viewed as a, quote, change, however you define that, educating them and vetting it with that group for opinions, the pros and cons, the impact to the overall staff and their specific operation as they see it is really the way that we would start any process here, even before it made it to a board for a final recommendation type thing. And that's more of an internal approach. But from there, we tend to go to a larger group of department heads when we feel like we've dotted our I's and crossed our T's at that level, and really give people a heads up on things and not unroll something without making sure that the team here generally understands what's about to happen. And I would say that where I see it is we've been through some changes with key department head roles here, and it's just as important. We can go through committee orientations and chairman orientations, and it's just as important that the department heads and that the team here, the leadership team, understands that there's a process to things here. It requires patience at times, and that can be a learning curve for a lot of individuals, myself at the top of that list, and more at the beginning of my career. I think once you've been through a few things here, it starts to make sense, but I think that's probably the biggest learning curve for all of us. I think change. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say what in listening to you, Kristen, this is something that it's an opportunity for a lot of businesses, not just in the club industry. We have this saying around storyteller, which is none of us is smarter than all of us, and it takes a certain type of leader to be able to have that, to be able to say, hey, I'm not the smartest guy in the room. I don't want to be the smartest person in the room, and I really need you all to be involved with this process so that we get the best outcome. And what some people may find interesting, you mentioned your GM, David Shagg, and for as long as he's been with the club, he has been a believer in that, hasn't he?
Sure. I mean, I think, one thing we really march to the beat of the drum that change can be successful if we really focus all of our initial efforts on, we call it building a coalition. And that might be with just staff only. That might be with, if we're about to see something in the HR world, and make sure, even from a committee perspective, and making sure that you have this subgroup that's really going to stand behind what's about to happen. And the whole point of that is to avoid any surprises along the way. And I think, in theory, if it's done correctly, your staff, at least from an internal approach, should be ready and almost beginning to operate in the new way that you're going to have this take place by the time the change is actually implemented. And, almost like one step ahead. And if we're all on the same page that way, it tends to go smoother, but we have to facilitate that communication.
Yeah, awesome. A lot of clubs have a hard time, I should say a lot of whether it's club managers, but I think a lot of clubs have an issue. When I talk to various people within the industry, a lot of clubs have a hard time with their boards. And you talk about, getting board buy-in or, having to run things through the board. I'll see a lot of eye rolls, or you hear a lot of, well, you know how that can go. And at the same time, you have found a way at the country club to not just get the buy-in from the people and from your staff, but really aligned with the board as well. How have you been able to do that? What are your secrets?
I think that it's funny. I don't think any meeting is going to go without a couple of eye rolls. Let me just say that. I think I've used the term committee-driven club to you, and we are. I think the synergy of the board and really management and how critical that is to our relationship truly does boil down to constant communication. If David Shagg were here, he'd tell you that some of the critical pieces to his success over a long period of time have been weekly meetings with our president or constant communication with the president. There was no executive committee here when he started 30 years ago. It kind of evolved into creating one, more so that there was a more frequent discussion with the treasurer, president, and secretary on things that a GM at the time had to keep moving and not wait 30 days for a board meeting to take place. There are communication fronts, a lot of it's meetings, but it's really important to get these groups together. In season, we have the director of golf and the golf chair, the director of grounds and grounds chair. We have the president, the GM, the AGM, and if we have something special like a U.S. Open, that chairman will probably be at the table. But monthly in season, we tend to get together as a group. It's a 7:30 in the morning meeting, and it's going through calendar or communication issues or things that are coming up at tournaments and course conditions, and it really gets everyone on the same page, as well as capital work that's about to take place. I think that with the overall board, we are in a practice of distributing minutes from every single committee meeting to the entire board. They're responsible for reading those ahead of time. And so there is, again, whether you're looking at a budget process or, anything that we have as far as meetings or process and the type of information that's shared with each other, I think all of that open communication and transparency really does it allows us to build a trust together that, really it starts at the top and it comes down on both, whether you're talking from staff end or the Board of Governors. And I think over time you find yourself, you might need to benchmark and you might need to educate a board and build credibility over time with that type of information. But I think little things that we have implemented over the time, we've copied from other clubs. We've implemented the charter page for committee chairs. We define expectations for all the new chairs coming on board as well as committee members. We're lucky in a sense that the board is it's textbook. It's a board of 12 plus the GM COO. I do sit in. If we have a U.S. Open chair, he sits in right now. It's 2 3-year terms, so having that 6-year stretch, it is, some people look at that as challenging. I think from our standpoint, for the most part, the stability has helped us here. Aside from that, you look underneath the board, if we were staring at an org chart, you'd see 28 plus committees and subcommittees that really make up the governance of the club. So they're truly in an advisory and support role, but I think that, when you're talking about governance and the synergy and the management, it all boils down to communication. But I think that we probably can do better in some areas, and we're probably, some of the things that I'm pointing out here are basic, but it works, and it's not necessarily going to work at every club, but here with the complexity of the committee structure, it's important to keep those communication lines open with the key people that will help get the message out.
So here's the disclaimer. It's not like the country club is perfect. It's not like you guys don't have your issues and challenges, right? I mean, everyone's got them. That said, you talk to a lot of people in the industry and people who wrestle with, challenges with the board and, communication with the board. If you were going to give a piece of advice to someone maybe new in their role at their club as a AGM or a GM, what would you say? What advice would you give to them based upon what you've learned in how to best manage and develop a relationship with your board?
Sure.
Putting you on the spot.
I know. I think, I don't want to be repetitive, but I do think, it's the little things, whether if you're at your desk and you're keeping a notebook that you have to inform your president about, or if you're allowing yourself to be in a role to think in an advisory capacity, if you will, and if you're talking to your team and you're in touch with things. For example, if something comes up like right now, we're in the middle of a construction project, and there's an old tree that is next to the clubhouse that we definitely looked at protecting in this process. And that was something operationally where, our director of grounds called a tree company, had them come out, take a look at this tree, analyze the roots, where the root structure was, how it would be impacted by construction, put together a proposal. Our project manager and I were sent the proposal from the director of grounds, and we took a look at it. And for me, my training has been that the next step should be to inform our grounds chair and our facilities chair. And if those two are not in the loop of why the tree looks like it's all band-aided up right now, or that trees can be a sensitive subject, and I know a lot of folks on golf courses are probably chuckling at that right now because we all have experience with it. But if you're not in a position to be able to think about, to take a step back and think, who do I need to make sure I'm looping in this? You're really at a disadvantage. And I think probably a lot of managers, you get caught up in the day-to-day, and I don't know, and that's not necessarily the manager. It might be the structure, it might be the team, it might be a lot of variables involved with that. But I think to be able to really take a step back in every meeting or situation and say, who does this impact, and and how? And then make sure that you're not only communicating, but you're making a recommendation if it's something that needs an action plan too.
Mm-hmm.
Looking for a crash course on everything you need to know to market your club online? We've created a 30-page essential guide to digital marketing for private clubs that you don't want to miss. From optimizing your website and developing relevant content to engaging your audience through social media, this comprehensive guide will lead you through every essential step you want to be taking to effectively market your club online. Download it now at storytellermn.com/guide.
So how important is it, and how do you create the kind of alignment in a club that, in alignment around a vision, around an approach to a mission even? How do you create alignment around, from the top down that goes not only through your staff and through the board? I mean, trust is so powerful, and without it, it leads to all the things that most of us, regardless of the business, we go nuts over, which is micromanagement. People are overly critical of your work, and it seems like so often for any organization, when they're lacking that level of trust, I mean, that's when everything seems like to fall apart, and where boards then won't trust people because everything just sort of reeks of a lack of trust. What has been,
right.
And so here's maybe our time. If David ends up listening to this, you can do a little brown nosing. But how much of it does start from David? So I hope you're listening, David. But the Kristen needs a raise. It does. I mean, but it does, right? I mean, it really does start with strong leadership and someone who's got a vision, who can go to bat for the team, as well as making sure that everyone's bought in.
Absolutely. I mean, I'd be completely remiss, and it's hard for me not to go on and on about David, obviously, but David has been here 31 years, and this club was not what it is today. Is certainly not what it was when he set foot on this property, and he will never take credit for any of that. But I do think the process in which this club was open and ready for change at the right time, and a combination of having who I view as the best in the industry at the helm, really was a recipe for success. And we're not done. I mean, we have our challenges. This club is not perfect. We have the same things that go on in the industry. But when you're looking at someone like a David Shag, and he's been here 31 years, and I've been fortunate enough, I've been by his side in this position for 10 years now. And I'm lucky enough to work directly for a key mentor in my life. But I think someone who, I don't know how different he is from other GMs, because frankly I've only worked for him as a GM. But
you hear
I would
stories.
say what I can speak to is the type of leader he is, and I think that he keeps himself educated on industry trends, and he pushes us forward as a team. His approach, and I've told you this before, Ed, I think in conversation, it's hard not to mention it, but we sit down as a management team once a week, and we recap last week and challenge what we would do differently. Every successful event we have here, we say, what would we do differently? Every process, whether it's a long-range planning process or a capital process, we have a leader who pushes not only a board but the staff to think about what you would do. What did you learn from this? And I think he's funny. He rips out magazines that his wife finds in Home and Garden magazine, Home and Garden, and it's a yogurt parfait. Or did you see this cool new beer that he rips out of Wine Enthusiast? And his assistant scans that stuff and sends it out to the management team or the chef. Or recently he gave me a golf article that was about women in the business, and it actually inspired me to go into other outlets that I was unfamiliar with as far as associations and really get myself educated differently. So I think it's little things like that. We have a human resource advance once a year. We have management advances. We have communications and IT advances. We don't call them retreats because we had a Marine who was our president of the club, and he said Marines don't retreat, they advance. And so it became advances for us. And what we do is we look at the next 12 months to 5 years out and just say, what are the key issues that we need to have on our mind? Hey, Jackie, what are we missing on the technology front that we need to be thinking about? Or what are the trends you're hearing about? From an HR standpoint, where do we want to be in 5 years? Do we need to revisit our mission statement and constantly challenge ourselves that we can improve? And that filters down to the member experience, no doubt. And I think things like benchmarking for committees and department heads and board of governors, he is constantly doing that. And I think when you're in a position that you're confident enough to say, I'm not the expert there, and even a GM that's been here for 30 years can say, let me call in a professional, like we've done recently with dining. We brought in the McMahon Group, and or club benchmarking is in our backyard. These are people that are willing to come in and present to the decision makers at the club. It's, obviously, selfishly as any manager is going to think, if they're reinforcing the same things that you may have brought up, that does build credibility.
Absolutely.
And if you don't have that viewpoint out of it and you just get discouraged that no one listened to you, that's the wrong approach.
Yeah.
But I do truly think, we're talking about a guy that leads by example. He parks where the staff parks. He walks across that golf course. He's following up constantly. People inquire, hey, he's been there a long time, and I tell everyone he's faster, he still outthinks us, and he's just as quick as any 25-year-old around here. So when you have that kind of energy, and enthusiasm, it comes from being passionate. It obviously is infectious. I'd like to think I'm passionate about what I do, and we just try to filter that down. I've been trained to think like him, and we joke and discuss the advantages and disadvantages of that, but I think overall for this club, there's a sense of security in knowing there's depth to how he would approach situations. And, the AGM role didn't exist. We just implemented it right around the U.S. Amateur in 2013. So even the org chart and that type of discussion that had to take place for him over time to build the type of team that this club really needs to operate, that in itself was a great accomplishment.
So here's what I'm hearing is someone who's been who's passionate about their work. And you guys laugh when I say it, but somewhat visionary with where they want to go and where they see the club, communicating that vision and open to feedback from other people to make sure, and certainly not a micromanager. Great communication, getting buy-in from their team as well. And these are all things that, like, as we're talking through this, like, I just hear you pulling these things out. Is some of the things that that have helped you to reach the success that you have. And while I think that for people to hear it, it's like, oh yeah, well, that makes sense. Well, of course, and yet it's so hard to pull off organizationally. And then the other part that I want to get your thoughts about as well, Kristen, are new people. When, it's finding the right people even that, that fit what you want to do. It's like, it's the culture of how you operate and manage that club. You train people. I mean, let's talk a little bit about the value of training and raising good people, as you would say.
Sure. I think it's interesting. We recently had a discussion about our mission statement as a staff, and I talked with David and I said, let's look at this in the next, for one of my goals personally on my goals list when you're sitting there and talking through your performance review, we really should look at the mission statement. It doesn't mention anything about us being an educational institution in a way. And I think when you look at what our golf professional is known for, our director of golf, and what he's known for with the number of head professionals that are around the country because of the program that he has over there. The same director of grounds, we have many superintendents out there. The culinary world, the management world, racket sports. It's, when you look at the graduates, as we call them, these people graduate from TCC and they move on, and it's pretty impressive that the membership supports such a vast educational program, but we try to also focus on things that are really free, that don't come down to resources necessarily, and a lot of that is, number one, when we're talking to anyone that is going to join our team, it all is attitude, and if they buy in initially out of the gate, that's a bonus, but over time, hopefully if they're they're buying in and, for lack of a better term, drinking the Kool-Aid, as people say in the industry. We're very calendar driven. We try to cross-train. So our golf interns are over working a wedding with food and beverage, and vice versa. Our food and beverage, our club management interns are over in golf for a day. They spend the day folding laundry in the laundry room with housekeeping. We use our resources. Our CFO might hold a class for not only our interns but our assistant managers. And I think, you hear from clubs that say, I don't have the resources to take on an internship program like that or to train like that. And I think that by using the experts that you have in-house at times, that's all you really need to be doing, and it keeps people engaged and challenged and motivated, and it gives them a taste of really, creating this institution that actually at times helps people figure out that this may not be what they want to do at all, and that's okay. That attitude and type of communication is critical for us to stay in touch with on our team.
Yeah, I was just going to say that really quickly, Kristen. I mean, so often when you're that clear and you have that much structure around, how you operate and why you operate a certain way, it makes it really easy for people to go, this isn't really my thing. And then no one's investing more time in either that, that job, that relationship than they really need. And how great is that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I do say at times, sometimes the most rewarding thank you notes that you get like a year later are from someone that you really had to help them see that they weren't made for this. And those are the people that come back and usually thank you, whether it's right away or years later, because they switched majors, they went back to school, they got into something completely different. I think as long as you're making some sort of impact that, whether it's good, bad, or ugly at the time, but overall it helps them grow and learn from it, then we're doing what we're supposed to. I think that, again, I really beat the drum. I mean, you came in and talked to all of our department heads about storytelling. And I think that, again, there are people in the industry that are willing to give their time and really re-energize and re-motivate a whole team of people. And you personally, Ed, were talking to a curling instructor and a rackets pro and, and then people from food and beverage and management and golf, and to motivate people no matter what their interest is really, those are the types of things that we try to do. You got to make time for it. And that is probably the one hang-up that I think a lot of managers get, is that they don't have the time to do it. And we just try to look pretty far out. We try to look 4 months out and say, what are some days and times that we can designate a 2-hour block and have our CFO come in and talk financials with the assistant managers? What are some days that I can get over to tennis and learn this and cross-train the way that I've referenced? But it is planning, but you have to make the time for it, and your time is free. Yeah. And if people feel like they have access to you and you're being open, honest, and candid and really willing to share your own experiences with anyone, whether they're new to their career or, been around a while, I think that those are the types of things that do build that trust over time and can be really rewarding to ultimately the membership, which is why we're here.
Yeah, that really is. None of us have enough time, and it's a very rare and unique commodity for some of us. But at the same time, like you said, I mean, if you plan out in advance and you really, as you guys have done, has made it a commitment to education and improving, it can be done. What, Kristen, from a club manager's perspective, I'm going to ask you to toot your own horn a little bit, but what are you most proud of? Like when you talk to other club managers, and I mean, you hear the conversations, you know what's happening, and I'm sure there's some things, that you guys can all talk about and relate to, but what are you most proud of from a management perspective of what you do at the country club?
Sure. It's tricky, but aside from it being uncomfortable, I think that, we're in a shift since the AGM role has come in. A lot of my career goals have been focusing on who I am and, frankly, identifying myself differently than David Shagg, and he would say that if he were sitting here with us. I think that the growth and the learning, the most rewarding thing for me is when I happen to be in a similar situation today than I was 5 years ago, and I know that I handled it in a very different way, whether it be a committee meeting or, anything, an HR issue. I think the most rewarding moments are when you're able to reflect that you've been through this before and you learned from something the last time and you know what you would do differently this time around. But I would tell you, I truly feel that in my heart, it is our team right now. They are a reflection of Kristen. I will take responsibility for hiring the crew that we have right now, whether they're in the management and training program or our management team as a whole. And David always stays involved with them, but I, right now, for the past year, implemented some classes here. We call them MIs. They're Mission Impossible classes. There's a whole backstory as to why they're called that. But it's kind of fun. You know, they walk into the room and the theme music is in the background, and we pick a different topic every other week to tackle. And we focus on things like membership experience and little things, how we're introducing each other to a new staff member, what the new staff member's experience is. I mean, I've been here I told you I've been in my position, or David's right-hand lady, for 10 years. I've been in my current role for 5, but I've worked at the club for 15 years. This was my first gig out of college. And I think at times I have to be in the position to say, I've been here a while, and I need a fresh set of eyes, and I need to use the people around me. And so earlier when we were talking about the director of grounds and the director of golf, and these are people that are really experienced, and they're pretty well seasoned in their careers. To me, it's just as critical to ask our brand new, assistant beverage manager who's in the MIT, our management and training program, hey, you've been here for 6 months now. What do you think? And it's interesting how you can open your eyes to some of the things that we're kind of just programmed to do. And you do find yourself implementing change, but it's for the better, and you find out it goes a really long way with the staff. I think for me, it's, I think the reward at this point in my career is making sure that I'm finding out what my brand is, how I can impart my leadership style onto my team, and work with key department heads, work with them and really, help them any way I can, but for them to teach me and use my resources that are available at my fingertips to just continue to improve. But I do think it's interesting. You can't take just one example. It's kind of an overall feeling and sense of maturity. Maybe it's becoming a mom. I think that had a major impact on probably the way I approach everything. But I do tend to keep things in perspective, Ed. I will be one to say, let's just take a deep breath. And my coaching style tends to be that we're lucky we're not in a hospital here.
Yeah, right.
We're in a club,
right. And
there is perspective that needs to be. You need to be able to be that voice of reason for a lot of people a lot of the time. And I think just staying true to those things. I get excited. I'm at the, I'm like a bulldog. I'm at the beginning of my career. I'm the mid of my career, but I still have goals there's still goals that I want to accomplish. So I'm the one that's reading or talking to my husband constantly. We're talking about vision and, I looked at this club and said, okay, if it's 2028, what do I see here? And it's interesting to watch the process of knowing that I secretly kind of jotted that down and didn't share it with my whole team. And but it is interesting to see some of the things start to come to life that I thought, oh, that would take 10 years. But then you reflect and say, well, why couldn't we do this now? And so I find my own self-motivation and passion and energy for this industry. It's almost like a responsibility to make sure that that's infectious to the rest of my team.
You have a lot of runway in front of you, Kristen. So, that's good. You do, though. It's really true. And my last question is really just sort of around that. I mean, you look at the club industry today, and some are of the belief that it's the challenges that are forthcoming are unique with a different consumer and really with the focus on a younger generation that may have a different way of looking at clubs and different things they want to get out of the clubs. There's going to be in some of the GMs that I've at least had a chance to talk to, they know that they're going to have to adapt, and it's very difficult because you have older members and you're trying to lure younger members, and you have to you want to take care of both of them. Is it more important now than it has been in the last 10, 15 years? Or maybe it's not, maybe I'm just over-exaggerating, but I feel like that alignment around direction, around vision, around who you're going to be or who you are as a club seems to me like it's more important now than it has been for, I don't know, I don't know the history of private clubs well enough to go back far enough, but it seems like for sure in the last 15, 20 years, maybe since the recession. But what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think you're spot on. We had a committee meeting last week, and there was one 41-year-old at the table, and it happened to be one of those committees where the majority of the group had already been the chairman at one point, and I think their collective experience on this committee was like 100 years. And
wow.
So we had these three new 30 and 40-somethings that were invited onto the committee, and it was our facilities group, and all of that is capital work. And we're at a very critical point at this club where we're 4 years out from the U.S. Open. There's a lot of building improvements that need to be made. There are post-U.S. Open projects that we know we're going to have to tackle. We have that roadmap from a financial standpoint, but the politics of it is very different, I think, today for what the younger group is looking for. And this particular committee member that spoke up, it was all about, like, you can't over-communicate this. We need to be more transparent. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing that? And it was funny, I think everyone appreciated all of his points, and we left that meeting, and I kind of nudged David, and I said, different generation.
Yeah.
And, and I personally, honestly, I've become obsessed. I'm on the cusp, I'm on the cusp of the millennial generation. I might be a Gen Xer, but, I think I've become obsessed with learning about what that group needs for more of an employee base where I am at this point. Yeah. And that's that's why I started those classes. This group, they want to feel they're part of something. They want open communication. They want access to managers. They want access to the CEO of any corporation. You read about T-Mobile, was so inspiring to me, reading about their company in Fortune magazine and hearing that, it's one Wednesday every month or whatever, that the standing meeting for all new employees, and he goes around and shakes all their hands. And obviously that's something that someone like a David Chag had always been accessible. But right now we find ourselves in the size of the business. We're doing these State of the Union meetings for the employees to attend. We're going to start with 2 in November and see where that takes us. But I think that at some point, when it comes to the governance and really the membership end of things, I don't know if the morning coffee with the GM is going to be what the next generation is looking for, right. But I do think the more often and more information you're pushing out there, whether it be electronically, in person, or by paper, it is going to be more critical. The expectation is different for being in the know, but the expectation is different for level of service and, even approach with the dollar. If you're paying to be a member, then you want to make sure you're getting as much as you can out of this facility. And it's interesting, here we're the only year-round gig in the Northeast with the types of recreation and services that we offer, and so we really have to stay on that. And I think it's interesting. I think our board approach and how it is in tune with next generation, starting a legacy program, starting a summer guest program to continue to feed the pipeline, are all really forward-thinking, but it's for the overall health of the club. But I have no doubt that my role in 5 or 10 years is going to be extremely different than what we're doing today. And whether that be through, electronic communications or how we're operating to make sure there's a lot of transparency, I think it's inevitable. And I'm right there with you. I see it day to day here.
Yeah. Hey, and to be able to have a team that can adapt and adjust and address things that come around and come about is going to be huge as well. Hey, thanks so much for joining us, Kristen.
Thank you for having me again. This was great.
Well, hey, I look forward to connecting with you again, and we'll stay in touch. Best of luck at the country club.
Thank you. Hope to see you soon.
All right.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Crushing Club Marketing, sponsored by Storyteller Media and Communications. Next up, you'll hear from Generations expert Amy Lynch. She addresses a very present issue for private clubs, appealing to the younger generation, and gets candid about why your tactics aren't working. You don't want to miss her advice on how to best attract younger membership while maintaining what's been working for years.